we have our three government IT professionals here to talk about their experiences. Dr. Rocio Alvarez is the CIO of the Berkeley Lab. Bob von Wolfrat was until recently, right, the CIO for the state of Wyoming, and here virtually is Captain Edgar Bucklatten. Where in the world are you exactly, physically?
I'm currently in Stuttgart, Germany.
Got it. So I think we were going to start by having each of you all talk about your experiences, switching to a cloud-based strategy, what worked, what didn't, and then we'll get into some Q&A. And through an exhaustive scientific process, I think we'll go left to right from my perspective. That work?
All right. So everyone hear me okay? All right. I'm Rocio Alvarez, and I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. We went with Google Apps. We started, I guess, in summer of 2009, and finished our implementation in summer of 2010. We have the full suite at this point. We've deployed, we started with mail, but we've got calendar, sites, docs, just the whole suite of the enterprise suite. We decided to go down that path in 2009 because we had been looking at, we had about a decade-old email system. We had a Sun system at that point, and had decided that we wanted, it was very reliable, but we wanted more functionality and mobility for our staff and scientists. We did our due diligence, and Google Apps was the vendor that met our requirements. So we proceeded down that path. And our strategy has always been cloud first. If you can't get it in the cloud, then you go to on-premises vendors. So we've been, we were sort of out there at the beginning. We're kind of a hybrid federal university entity. We are part of the Department of Energy, but we're also part of the University of California. So we have lots of scientists, lots of PhDs, lots of researchers who are very receptive to new technology. So to some degree, I had an easy crowd that I was working with. It wasn't very hostile. They've been very satisfied. We survey all of our users after we move them over after we moved them over into Google Apps, and we were probably in the 80% range of user satisfaction. So overall, there were some rough spots, and because we were so early on, we got a lot of attention from Google when we were facing things around, for instance, documentation that wasn't there. We were having to use some of their documentation, but then really augmenting that with our own internal documentation. So we got a lot of attention from Google, so there's not too many bad things I can say about them, but overall a good experience.
Perhaps you can say some bad things about them then?
Absolutely not. The state is kind of similar to Dr. Alvarez's situation with the lab in particular. You had a lot of email systems out there, none of which worked very well together, and some of them had been out in agencies for many, many years. Some had a lot of attention and some didn't. And as we started seeing issues and problems and survivability of some of those systems, we decided to take a look at it. And we did this exact same thing that you would do in any government operation, went through the RFP process, contract bid award, all of that. But we did it in a very fast-tracked way. By the time we signed the contract and our final implementation, which is scheduled roughly for end of June for the rest of the agencies and the FTE mailboxes that are in the state, we will have completed that well within 10 months of contract signing. So that was kind of our impetus for change, is to do this in a unique way. And the phrase better, faster, cheaper came from Wyoming, just in case there's any question about that. We ran into several issues, and in this business for 20, 25 years, and going through multiple enterprise deployments, implementations of applications, I can honestly say that for the first time, our experience was most of our issues were internal. They were not the implementer, they were not the vendor product, They were not any of those things. They were dealing with employees and change, but they were also dealing with a lack of focused management on existing email systems for a number of years. Archives, very simple thing. Where are they for every employee within an agency? How can you get to them? What are the firewalls? What are the traversal rules? What are the mail routing rules? All of those type of things that on the surface you go through, but as you start implementing and actually putting rubber on the road, you start finding out that maybe this agency or that particular system didn't have everything documented as well as it could. So the majority of our issues were almost all internal. I think the other one I wanted to mention was education. We provided kind of over-the-top user application information, DVDs, CDs, videos, webinars, insight, on-site personal training, all of those type of things, every venue for training that you could possibly imagine. What we didn't realize is not all employees would take full advantage of any one of those things. So one of the things that we did after our first round of deployments was we procured an additional help desk service, 1-800 if you will, that provides Google Apps training, support, help desk services, pretty good knowledge, both for Chrome, Internet Explorer, a bunch of other applications. And that filled a big gap for us where you won't have the resident Google expertise on staff initially. Could we do it again? Would we do it again? Absolutely. And I tell you, I'm impressed with you folks being here because a lot of people don't realize that the reason that you're here is because you want to be better, you want to be more efficient, and it's all of our tax dollars. And I just want to tell you, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And Captain Buck Latin, your experience at U.S. European Command.
Well, first of all, greetings or guten Abend from Stuttgart, Germany. First of all, I wanted to say thanks to Tom Wazinski and Dan Israel for allowing me to listen in on the previous presentations, which I think are phenomenal at this point, and allowing me to participate in discussions via Google Chat. And again, making me just a bit larger than life than I'm used to. In the past couple of hours, just to let you know, I was using Google Docs to coordinate my talking points with my colleague, Lieutenant Adam Clampett, who unfortunately had to leave the conference early. But before I start, I was told by my legal folks to provide this legal disclaimer. Our remarks are not intended to be and should not be taken as a Department of Defense or U.S. government endorsement of Google or its products. So with that said, I'm a big fan of Google. I've used Google since 2005 on the private side, and looking at ways to leverage the capabilities within public affairs and how we do business here at U.S. European Command. A bit of background on my military career. Served in the military for 23 years, first as a naval flight officer off carriers for 8 years, and then a public affairs officer for 15, and most recently here at U.S. European Command for the last 3 years, serving under Admiral Jim Stavridis, who is one of the biggest proponents of innovation and technology in the military today. So I'm honored and privileged to work for him. Now, keep in mind that I am not an information technology guy. I'm just someone who's very passionate and an end user of information technology, but always looking for ways to leverage technology to do my job as a public affairs officer faster, cheaper, smarter, and collaboratively. Now, we've got a big challenge here at EUCOM. We oversee U.S. military activities with 51 allies and partner nations throughout Europe. We have over 90,000 troops from each of the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and some Coast Guard. And the biggest challenge is that we have over 23 official languages that are spoken here in Europe. Even though English is the most common language, people feel more comfortable with collaborating in their native languages. So as Rob pointed out, I was asked to talk about how we collaborate at EUCOM and where we're planning to go. So on the collaboration piece, like most of you there in the US government, we use the Microsoft Enterprise Suite to collaborate on our unclassified and classified networks using SharePoint, Microsoft Office, and even Office Communicator for video and text chat. But of course, with dwindling budgets and manpower, we need to think outside of the box and look at ways, again, to do things faster, cheaper, smarter. So we've got to look outside of non-traditional military methods to innovate in order to stay relevant with the global community and keep up with the fast-paced technology. We need to be agile enough to continuously try out new capabilities instead of waiting for generations of technology before we finally implement them in the military. And most importantly, especially here at UCOM, with Geneva just down the road, we must engage with our non-military, public and private partners who are definitely light years ahead of us with the apps and tool development. And on that note, mobile and multi-language translation are some of the things we're looking at. But as far as office technology here for public affairs, in addition to our unclassed and classified networks, my office, public affairs, has commercial internet drop, so we have unfettered access to the internet. And on the mobile side, like everyone else, we've got BlackBerries, but we also have iPhones and Androids that are not connected to our network, but enable us to leverage the fast-paced mobile technology apps in order to communicate using social media and crowdsourcing. And here within the office, we're experimenting with the use of cloud-based technologies and online systems, especially, again, to collaborate with non-military public and private partners, and then being able to access information wherever you are, regardless of what device you're using. So as a result of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, the flooding in Pakistan, and most recently the 2011 earthquake in Japan, it demonstrated how social media and crowdsourcing and collaboration tools can help save lives. So the open source, no-cost tools like crisis maps and real-time collaboration and imagery data sharing came to the forefront. So we realized that within the military, we need to leverage that dialogue that's taking place in real time and figure out how we can use that technology to collaborate effectively using tools that are innovative, intuitive, and allow people to seamlessly contribute to the cause. So over the past year, and most recently executed during March, we participated in an exercise called Exercise 24 Europe, conducted by San Diego State University. Now, this is the first non-military, unclassified, open source international exercise that UCOM's ever participated in. And it simulated the use of social media, crowdsourcing, and collaboration tools during a simulated tsunami off the coast of the Balkans. The takeaways from that exercise were that we had 92 nations participating in the exercise in an event that was planned and executed in only 6 months using Google Apps, Google Docs, Sites, and Gmail that was purchased all on my government credit card. We used open source technologies to develop the crisis maps and other visualization mapping tools to establish operational situational awareness based on the data imagery from the crowd during a natural disaster. Of course, the mobile technology was huge with the exchange of information with first responders and organizations on the ground during the first 48 hours, which is very critical during a search and rescue disaster relief operation. And then the need for effective unclassed information sharing and collaboration to be able to share with partners regardless of whether they're military, NGO, international organization, Geneva, in real time to ultimately help save lives. So with that, Rob, I look forward to the questions. Thanks.
All right. Well, I thought I'd start. It was interesting during the chat before the Onion, talking about the difficulty, the sort of hacks and kludges you have to put into systems to get data out of an existing legacy system, mainframe, what have you. I'm wondering if each of you could talk a little bit about how you've sort of gotten over that hump. What was the hardest bit of data to get out of the old system and into the new cloud one?
Well, we did our due diligence before we went with Google and basically looked at how not only moving data, but should we exit, security, data location, privacy, a whole host of the kind of hot button issues that come up for any CIO. And so we did our due diligence before we went with Google Apps, understood that well. In terms of operationally moving data, we developed our migration plan for moving mail. We had, for our calendar, we actually we moved over maybe a year of data and left everything else behind in the legacy system. So it was a pretty thorough plan that we put together to move data from one environment to the other environment.
That's pretty much the same as our approach. what we didn't realize is that the agencies really didn't have a good handle on what data they had where. And as a result, a lot of the users, and I'm talking in the 1,000 range user count, weren't really sure where their archives were. In fact, some users had gigabytes worth of ancient email archives, and as you know, public disclosure is a big issue in e-discovery. So it turned out to be a much broader education process with users. Are these public records? Are these retainable? What's the records retention rules? All of that. Because we didn't necessarily want to spend resources migrating stuff that we wouldn't need to migrate. So that took a lot longer process than we thought. We actually had some agencies look at archives and say, we're not moving them. They're gone. And that's between them and the records retention rule. But it is a very intense discovery process, and depending on the agency's ability with IT staff on site, it may be more relegated to the actual user and talking with them. So it was a great opportunity to level set all of our data where it's at now, and how we manage that.
Kevin?
And we at UCOM haven't had the problem with migrating data because we haven't migrated the data. But certainly we've opened up dialogue with our information technology guys on the use of Google potentially. And even more so, we've maintained our Google Apps accounts, all 50 of them, for collaboration with public-private partners in the near future as a result of the success with X24 Europe. So there is a lot of interest in what we're doing. Certainly, there's still a lot of questions to be answered about who owns the data and the security of the data as it's being pushed out.
Oh, the one thing, I might add, the one thing that we did struggle with a bit, we bumped up against the 25 gigabit limit. We have lots of scientists that store everything in email. And so we struggled with that because that was the limit when trying to figure out what we would do with those 6 users where we had to continue to run our IMAP server for them. They're close to being Nobel laureates, so we have to be very nice to them. But that was an issue for us. If you do have users that archive and use email as their archival system, the 25 gigabit limit is a difficult thing to get around.
Interesting. The next thing I thought I'd get into, one of the most important words in cloud computing is uptime. Have you had any issues with outages? I know you mentioned one you would run into, fortuitously enough, just yesterday.
We use our backup service. We use is Carbonite, so cloud service for backing up our desktops and so on. And you do your due diligence when you're going to go with any cloud vendor. Ask a whole series of questions. Yesterday, Carbonite disappeared. We could no longer back up. We could no longer do anything with them. We couldn't even get to their website. We couldn't send them an email. They didn't exist. We found out that our ISP and their ISP depeered for whatever reasons. Found out that they were single home. They didn't have provider diversity. So we've been working with Carbonite. We're back up and back online. But this is one question that you might want to ask when you're looking at any cloud provider. You go through a whole series of questions of security, DR, bandwidth, privacy. But another thing you might want to ask is about provider diversity. You don't want your service disappearing from you. Fortunately, it was backup, which you can tolerate 3-4 hours down. But if it were email, you might not want to be 3 or 4 hours offline.
Any outage issues you've had, Ed?
Yeah, I can only say that the uptime for the Google Apps when we use it for X24 Europe was phenomenal compared to the traditional issues that we have with our unclass and unclassified network. But Tom Wazinski, who was in Montenegro, apparently had no problem whatsoever being able to exchange data using Google Apps, using his Android tethered to an iPad. So it was amazing that 4G technology in an area that doesn't have a lot of IT infrastructure worked extremely well and really made the success for X24 Europe.
Next, I thought I'd get into we talked about getting data into cloud systems. At some point, you might want to get them out of one cloud system into another. How confident are you that, should you have to make another change, it will be a lot easier than that first step off of your old legacy systems?
Very confident. As you know, with government contracting, RFPs, and the whole procurement laws, whether federal, state, or local, all require those things to be in writing, and we have those clauses. And Google is committed, unlike many other vendors, to help retrieve that data and put it in a form to however we need it, to move it. I think the significant piece for us is we have it now together in one platform, one application, one version of the truth, if you will, and that's never been the case in the state before. So that fact alone will help us migrate data, should we ever need to.
Anything to add there? Okay, at this point, I think I want to open it up to questions from the audience, trying to leave time for that. We have one microphone there and another one there. Who would like to go first? We have one on the left, right, whichever it is.
For all those folks that work here in the Department of Homeland Security is the big issue for you guys.
You have to turn it on. It's not on.
The question was, security. How confident are you in the security of the system? Which I guess also means, the training of your own users to resist social engineering attacks, since that has been an issue with Gmail in the past few weeks.
No, that's an excellent
Yahoo.
point. I mean, it's much more, security is not really about your email provider or your, calendar provider. It's about your training of your staff, because there's no checklist you can give anyone other than be smart about what you get, be smart about what you do when you're online. When you receive an email, what to look for, what looks odd. The drive-by downloads when you visit a site that looks completely legitimate. There's just so many flavors of how you can encounter some, the malware that it's impossible to give a laundry list. That said, we went through, again, very detailed analysis with Google when we were evaluating their products. We were actually part of the UC system, and the University of California was very interested in the time also, and looking at Google Apps. And so we did a pretty thorough analysis of the security systems that Google has. Sort of at the end of the day, I always say, I think Google's security budget is probably a little higher than mine. So they probably invest a little bit more than I can invest in that.
I would echo exactly the same thing. We did some extreme review of not only the FISMA criteria, but we went from some of the purported, more secure agencies and operations within the state and attempted to apply the same FISMA criteria to those agencies. And I can tell you that we have more security with this application than we've ever had in the state before. In addition to that, we went through the criminal justice system, because obviously each state has criminal investigations, and looked through that requirement from an FBI perspective. And again, what we're provided with these applications is much more secure than we've ever had before. In addition to that, we also bought Postini encryption service, so all of our users, anywhere, anytime, can encrypt email and send it secured.
Anything to add, Ed?
And as far as security for U.S. European Command, we are always thinking about security when it comes to open access to the internet. Our folks here on the information technology staff did the risk assessment, and believe it or not, have opened up Gmail, Hotmail, and other online cloud mail services on our unclassified network. So everyone has access to that. As far as the training piece of Google Apps, it was a little bit challenging because we had a lot of folks that weren't used to the entire suite of Google, but certainly Gmail was very easy because everyone was already using it. So it didn't take much time for us to spin up our small staff that participated in the exercise, but certainly there's now a lot of interest in more folks being able to leverage Google Apps for their day-to-day work.
Yeah, let's talk about that training issue a bit. I've seen this at my old employer, and I think we've all seen it. People are used to applications that by an objective standard may be ugly, clumsy, and complicated, but they're what they know. How much of an issue is that sort of, legacy learning, I suppose?
Well, we did because we rolled out mail over the course of a year, we identified sort of the subpopulations that we trained, so we made training available to whomever was going to be migrated immediately before, because you don't want to train too far in advance, people forget. It's a struggle to try and get people in to actually sit somewhere and train them and they listen to you. So it was, we really spent a lot of resources to get people trained, primarily because we were pushing this, you are now in the self-service world. We're no longer going to hold your hand through all of these things. So we did spend quite a bit of resources on that. Another thing that was interesting as well is once we did roll out Calendar and Mail, those are the two big apps that we did first, the help desk had a very odd reaction to Google Apps. The help desk that reports to me is, they are sort of the front line for the IT division, and they would get calls, and they were very disoriented with Google Apps because they'd go home one day and they'd come back and Google had pushed out some new functionality, and they'd say, oh, it's changed, it's very weird, it's changing again, it's changing again. They're not used to that. And so when users would call in, basically my staff was saying, it's not me, it's Google, I can't help you. So we had to work with them to say, no, that's not what you say. We do have some insight into what's coming next, and this is the way it will be now. So it's a little shift for people in the help desk to sort of be able to support a product that is not static.
I think I'd echo the exact same thing. I think the phenomenal piece of psychology here is there's a window of about 2 weeks to maybe 3 on the outside where the initial help desk calls, the vast majority of them are password issues. I typed in the wrong thing, and then when you originally sign on to a new account, you got to do the CAPTCHA and interpret the letters, and people had trouble with that because they'd never had to do that before. But that 2 week to 3 week window post-implementation, you will see the help desk calls go from large, probably a 60, 70% drop, because there's some affinity to using that tool for a couple of weeks that is, I don't understand it, there's some psychology behind it, but people get on with their business. Email is not their business. They have a job to do. Email is a tool to help them do their job and collaborate better. But for some reason, there's a 2 week window there where all your resources are focused on help desk and responsiveness and helping people get through whatever the learning curve is. But after that, just think of your help desk as temporary.
Ed, you get the last word.
And from a training perspective, one of the great things about the exercise we did using Google Apps was that it allowed us to showcase to certain members of the staff the ability to be able to collaborate in real time with up to 50 people, which is I think one of the big benefits of Google Apps. Certainly with SharePoint, as we live every day through, you can only open one document at a time with one person, and before you contribute to that other person has to close it. So it gets frustrating at times. You're not sure if it's the current document that you're working on. During the exercise, the planning for the exercise, we had to collaborate from Stuttgart with our colleagues in San Diego. So it was a bit challenging for us to be able to do that collaboration because of costs and things like that. But certainly, Google Apps allowed us to reduce the division between us geographically and allow us to collaborate with colleagues in San Diego with things like our measles, which is our basically our document that lists all the events that take place during the exercise, our operations and milestones, and other documents in real time, regardless of what time of day. So because of that, a lot of our staff are very interested in using that further for other exercises too, and demonstrate that to other part of our nation so we can collaborate even further in the unclassified world.
Good. Well, that's all the time we have left. Thank you all. Thank you for logging in from afar. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.